I still remember the chill that ran down my spine when my mother spoke those words. It was my sister's graduation dinner at our family's favorite restaurant, the one with the crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths that we only visited for special occasions. The waiter had just cleared our plates, and everyone was relaxed after the delicious meal and several glasses of expensive wine. My sister Emma sat across from me, her graduation cap placed carefully on the table beside her, the tassel perfectly arranged. She'd graduated with honors from her business program, and my parents couldn't have been prouder. I was proud too, of course. Emma had always been the determined one, the focused one. I'd taken a different path, pursuing photography and freelance work that I loved, even if it didn't come with the prestige my parents valued. Mom tapped her glass with her spoon, gathering everyone's attention. Dad smiled knowingly beside her. My aunt and uncle leaned forward expectantly, while my grandparents, Mom's parents, exchanged excited glances. Everyone knew something was coming. Today, Mom began, her voice carrying that practiced tone she used for important announcements. We're celebrating not just Emma's graduation, but her future. She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a thick envelope with a gold ribbon tied around it. The restaurant seemed to grow quieter, or maybe it was just the blood rushing in my ears. Emma, Mom continued, your father and I couldn't be more proud of your achievements. You've proven yourself in every way possible. She slid the envelope across the table. This is a gift to help you begin your journey. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she untied the ribbon and opened the envelope. Her eyes widened, and I watched as her mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. It's a world tour package, she whispered, pulling out what looked like luxury travel brochures. First-class flights, 5-star accommodations. Her voice trailed off as she flipped through the pages. A year of discovery, Dad added proudly. All the major business capitals, New York, London, Tokyo, Singapore, Dubai. We've arranged for meetings with some of my connections too. It's all there. About $70,000 worth of experiences that will set you up for your career. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. I sat there, my congratulatory smile frozen on my face. I was happy for her, truly. But there was also a knot forming in my stomach, a familiar sensation whenever these family gatherings highlighted the different ways my parents viewed their 2 daughters. This is what happens when you apply yourself, my grandmother said, reaching over to pat Emma's hand. Your parents have always known you were going places. I took a sip of my water, trying to keep my expression neutral. I'd learned long ago that showing disappointment only led to lectures about my choices and potential. Then my mother looked directly at me, and something in her eyes made my heart sink. It was that look, the one that had followed me throughout childhood whenever I brought home a B instead of an A, or when I chose art camp over the business leadership program they'd wanted me to attend. Caroline, she said, my name sounding almost like an afterthought. Don't you have something to say to your sister? Everyone turned to look at me, the weight of their expectations pressed down on my shoulders. Congratulations, Em, I said warmly, meaning it despite everything else. You've earned it. I thought that would be the end of it, but my mother wasn't finished. This is what ambition looks like, Caroline, she said, her voice taking on that educational tone she used when delivering life lessons. Your sister set goals and achieved them. The table grew uncomfortably quiet. Dad cleared his throat, perhaps sensing the conversation was heading into dangerous territory. Jane, he said quietly to my mother, today is about celebrating. But Mom had that look in her eyes, the one that meant she had something to say and wouldn't be deterred. No, Richard. Caroline needs to hear this, she insisted. Maybe it will finally motivate her. Emma looked down at the table, suddenly very interested in the patterns on the tablecloth. Mom, I started. Can we not do this here? When was the last time you had a real job interview? she interrupted. Or applied for a position with growth potential? Emma has been working toward this her entire life, while you've been... She waved her hand dismissively, taking pictures at weddings and selling prints at local markets. My aunt touched my mother's arm gently. Jane, both your girls are talented in different ways. But Mom just shook her head, her eyes still fixed on me. And then she said it. The words that would echo in my mind for months afterward. She has a future, Mom said, nodding toward Emma while still looking directly at me. You don't. The table fell silent. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade away. Emma's face had gone pale, her excitement over the gift dimming in the face of our mother's cruelty. I felt as though I'd been slapped. Throughout my life, there had been comments, comparison, subtle digs, but never had she stated her opinion of my worth so plainly, so publicly. Dad reached for Mom's hand, squeezing it in warning. Jane, he muttered, that's enough. But the damage was done. I sat there, 27 years old, feeling like I was 10 again, being told I wasn't enough, would never be enough. With practiced composure, I raised my glass. To Emma and her bright future, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Everyone hastily raised their glasses, grateful for the chance to move past the uncomfortable moment. Enjoy it, I whispered, as I took a sip of my wine, though whether I was speaking to Emma or to myself, I wasn't entirely sure. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Emma's plans for the trip, which cities she was most excited to visit, how Dad's business connections would help her. I nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, but inside, something had shifted. A lifetime of trying to earn my mother's approval suddenly felt like a fool's errand. And in that moment, as I watched my family celebrate the daughter they valued, I made a decision that would change everything. That night, after the dinner, I didn't go back to my apartment. Instead, I drove to the beach, the place I always went when I needed to clear my head. The moon was nearly full, casting a silver path across the water. I kicked off my shoes and walked along the shore, letting the cool water wash over my feet as I replayed my mother's words. She has a future. You don't. 6 simple words that somehow summed up my entire relationship with my mother. But as I walked, watching the endless rhythm of the waves, something strange happened. Instead of feeling crushed by her judgment, I began to feel liberated. If I had no future in her eyes, then I had nothing left to lose, no expectations to meet, no approval to seek. For the first time in my life, I could stop trying to be the daughter she wanted and simply be the person I was meant to be. I pulled out my phone and looked at the background image, a photograph I'd taken of a storm rolling in over these very waters, the lighting perfectly capturing the raw power of nature. It had won a local competition last year, though I'd never told my family. What was the point? To them, it was just another hobby, not a real career. But that photograph had led to a connection with a gallery owner who'd been impressed with my work. She'd been asking me for months to put together a collection for a showing, but I'd been hesitant, afraid of failing, of proving my mother right. With the sound of the waves as my witness, I made my decision. I opened my email and wrote to the gallery owner, accepting her offer. Then I did something I'd been considering for months, but hadn't had the courage to pursue. I applied for a 6-month photography residency program in Iceland that I'd been dreaming about. It was competitive and prestigious in the art world, even if my family would never see it that way. My hands were shaking as I hit send on both emails, but for the first time in years I felt truly alive. The path forward suddenly seemed clear, even if I had no idea where it might lead. 3 days after the graduation dinner, my phone rang. It was Emma. "Hey," she said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Do you have time to meet for coffee?" We agreed to meet at a small cafe halfway between our apartments. When I arrived, Emma was already there, her perfect posture a stark contrast to her troubled expression. "I wanted to apologize for Mom," she said as soon as I sat down. What she said at dinner was cruel and unfair. I stirred my coffee, watching the cream create swirling patterns. "You don't need to apologize for her, Em." "I know, but..." She hesitated, fiddling with her cup. "I feel terrible. That dinner was supposed to be a celebration, and she turned it into another opportunity to criticize you." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Behind her confident exterior, I could see the weight of our mother's expectations pressing down on her shoulders, too. Emma might have been the favorite, but that came with its own kind of prison. "Can I ask you something?" I said quietly. "Are you excited about this trip? Is it what you want?" Emma's eyes widened slightly, as if no one had bothered to ask her that question. She started, then stopped. "Parts of it, yes. The travel, seeing new places. That sounds amazing. But the business meetings, the networking, following in Dad's footsteps." She shook her head. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's dream." It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. As children, we'd been close, but as we grew older and our paths diverged, mine away from our parents' expectations, hers directly toward them, we'd drifted apart. "What would you do if you could choose anything?" I asked. She laughed nervously. "That's the problem. I've been following their plan for so long, I'm not sure I know what I want anymore." She took a deep breath. "But I do know I don't want this trip if it comes at your expense." I told Mom how inappropriate her comments were. I raised an eyebrow. "How did that go over?" "About as well as you'd expect," Emma said with a grimace. She said I was being overly sensitive and that she was just speaking the truth for your own good. I wasn't surprised. That had always been our mother's defense, that her criticism was for our benefit, a way to push us toward success as she defined it. "Well, I have some news," I said, changing the subject. "I've accepted an offer to show my work at the Westridge Gallery." Emma's face lit up with genuine excitement. "Caro, that's incredible. When is the showing?" 3 months from now, and..." I took a deep breath. "I've also applied for a photography residency in Iceland." "Iceland?" Emma looked surprised but impressed. "That sounds amazing. When would that start?" "If I get accepted, and it's a big if, it would be right after the gallery showing. 6 months documenting the landscape, the changing of seasons, working with some incredible photographers from around the world." Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're going to get it. Your work is beautiful." Her support meant more than she knew. For a moment, we were just sisters again, cheering each other on, the way it used to be before our mother's comparisons had come between us. As we were finishing our coffee, Emma's phone buzzed with a text. She checked it, and her face fell. "Everything okay?" I asked. "It's Mom. She wants me to come over to discuss the final trip itinerary." She sighed. "I should go. But Caro..." She hesitated. "Would you help me with something first?" "Of course. What do you need?" "I want to see your photographs, the ones that will be in the gallery. Would you show me your portfolio?" I was touched by her request. "Now?" She nodded firmly. "Now. Mom can wait." We went back to my apartment, where I showed her the collection I was preparing for the gallery showing. Landscapes mostly, but with a focus on human elements within them. A solitary figure against vast spaces, abandoned structures reclaimed by nature, the interplay of light and shadow creating stories within each frame. Emma was quiet as she looked through them, her expression growing more intense with each image. "These are extraordinary," she finally said, her voice hushed. "The way you capture loneliness without making it feel lonely. There's something hopeful in how small the human elements are against these landscapes." Her observation struck me. I'd never articulated it that way, but she'd captured exactly what I was trying to express. "You understand my work better than I do," I said, smiling. Emma looked at me seriously. "You do have a future, Caro. A brilliant one. It's just not the one Mom can see." Her words healed something in me that had been broken for a very long time. Later that evening, I received an unexpected call from my father. His voice sounded strained. "Caroline, there's been a situation," he said carefully. "Your mother and sister had a serious disagreement about the trip." "What happened?" I asked, alarmed. "Emma told your mother she wants to modify the trip. Fewer business meetings, more cultural experiences. She also..." He hesitated. "She also said she wanted to invite you along for part of it." I was stunned. "She what?" "She said if the trip was truly about discovery, she wanted to share it with you, that your perspective would add value to her experience." I could hear the confusion in his voice. This was clearly not how he'd expected things to play out. "How did Mom take that?" I asked, though I could guess the answer. "Not well," Dad admitted. "She said the trip was designed specifically for Emma's career development, and that bringing you along would dilute the purpose." I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. And then, Emma stood her ground. Said if she couldn't modify the trip to include you for at least part of it, she didn't want to go at all. There was a note of bewildered pride in my father's voice. "I've never seen her stand up to your mother like that." My heart swelled with love for my sister. After years of walking separate paths, she was trying to build a bridge between us. "Your mother is..." Dad sighed heavily. "She's upset. She's threatening to cancel the trip entirely if Emma doesn't see reason." "Is that why you're calling?" I asked. "You want me to talk Emma into accepting the trip as originally planned?" There was a long pause. "Actually, no," he said, surprising me. "I'm calling to ask what you want." It was perhaps the first time in my adult life that my father had asked me that question, and actually seemed interested in the answer. "I want Emma to be happy," I said honestly. "If that means going on the trip as planned, that's fine. If it means modifying it, that's fine too. What I don't want is to be the reason for more family conflict." Dad was quiet for a moment. "You know, your mother only wants what's best for both of you." It was his standard defense of her behavior, but this time, there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. "Dad," I said gently, "Mom wants what she thinks is best for us. Those are different things." Another long silence. Then, "Maybe you're right." The admission seemed to cost him something. "I've been thinking about what happened at the dinner, what your mother said to you." He cleared his throat. It wasn't right. Coming from my father, who had spent decades avoiding conflict with my mother, this was monumental. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "I saw your photography website," he continued, the words coming out in a rush as if he needed to say them before he lost his nerve. "Emma showed it to me yesterday. Your work is remarkable, Caroline. I had no idea you were so talented." Tears sprang to my eyes. "Really? Really? The composition? The use of light? I may not know much about art, but I know what moves me. And your photographs?" His voice broke slightly. "They tell stories I didn't know needed telling." We talked for nearly an hour, the longest, most honest conversation I'd had with my father in years. He asked about my gallery showing, about the residency in Iceland. He listened in a way he never had before, as if truly seeing me for the first time. As we were saying goodbye, he said something that would stay with me for years to come. "Caroline, I've spent too long letting your mother define success for this family. I'm beginning to think we've all been poorer for it." That night, I received a text from Emma. Trip canceled. Mom freaked out. Coming to stay with you for a few days. Is that okay? I texted back immediately. Always. 2 hours later, Emma arrived at my door with a small suitcase and red-rimmed eyes. As soon as I opened the door, she fell into my arms. I've never seen her so angry, she whispered as I held her. She said I was throwing away my future, that I was being ungrateful and foolish. I led her to my couch and made us both tea. What happened exactly? Emma took a shaky breath. After I saw your photographs, I couldn't stop thinking about what Mom said at dinner, about you not having a future. It was so obviously wrong, so cruel. And it made me wonder what else she's been wrong about. Emma curled her fingers around the mug of tea, staring into it as if it might hold answers. I told Mom I wanted to redesign the trip, keep the travel parts but replace most of the business meetings with experiences that would actually teach me something about the world. She looked up at me. And I told her I wanted you to join me for at least part of it. Why would you do that? I asked softly. Because I've been following their path for so long that I'm not sure who I am anymore, Emma confessed, her voice breaking. When I saw your photographs, the way you see the world, I realized you've been brave enough to follow your own vision while I've just been compliant. She wiped a tear from her cheek. I thought maybe if you came with me, I could see the world through your eyes for a while, figure out what I actually want. I was deeply moved by her vulnerability. What did Mom say? At first, she tried to reason with me, said the trip was designed specifically for networking opportunities and professional development. When I insisted, she got angry. Emma's voice hardened. She said I was throwing away a golden opportunity and that your lack of ambition was apparently contagious. I winced at my mother's words, but they no longer had the power to wound me the way they once had. Then she gave me an ultimatum. Take the trip as planned or not at all. Emma's eyes flashed with an unfamiliar defiance. So I told her to cancel it. You didn't have to do that, I said, reaching for her hand. That trip was a huge opportunity, even if it wasn't exactly what you wanted. Was it? She asked, looking directly at me. An opportunity to become exactly what Mom wants me to be? I'm not sure that's an opportunity at all. She squeezed my hand. Seeing your work, the way you've carved your own path, it made me realize I've never done that. Not once. We stayed up late into the night talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Emma confessed that while she'd excelled in business school, she'd never felt passionate about it. What she truly loved was the research aspect, the human stories behind economic trends. She told me about a professor who'd suggested she consider economic anthropology, studying how culture and society influence economic behavior. But she'd never mentioned it to our parents because it didn't fit their definition of success. Remember when we were kids and we used to make up stories about the people we saw in restaurants? Emma asked, smiling at the memory. I laughed. You were always better at that than me. You'd create these elaborate backstories for everyone. I still do it, she admitted. In meetings, on the subway, I'm always wondering about people's lives, what shapes their choices. She looked thoughtful. Maybe that's why your photographs spoke to me so much. They tell stories about people and places in a way that makes you wonder about everything that happened before and after that moment was captured. As the night wore on, something shifted between us. The wall that had grown between us over years of maternal comparison began to crumble. By the time we finally went to sleep, Emma on my pull-out couch, me in my bedroom, it felt like we'd found our way back to each other. The next morning, my phone rang early. It was my mother. Caroline, she said without preamble, I need you to talk some sense into your sister. I took a deep breath, glancing at Emma, who was still asleep on the couch. Good morning to you too, Mom. Don't be flippant. This is serious. Emma is about to throw away an incredible opportunity because of some misguided notion of solidarity with you. I walked quietly to my bedroom and closed the door so our conversation wouldn't wake Emma. "Maybe you should respect her decision," I suggested calmly. "She's an adult, capable of choosing her own path. This is your influence, isn't it?" My mother's voice was cold. "You've always been jealous of her success, and now you're trying to drag her down to your level." The accusation was so unfair, so wildly inaccurate, that I almost laughed. "Mom," Emma came to me. "I didn't seek her out or try to influence her in any way." "Then send her home," my mother demanded. "Tell her to stop this nonsense and accept the gift we've given her." Something inside me hardened. All my life, I'd tried to avoid direct conflict with my mother, to keep the peace, to be the daughter who bent rather than broke, but not anymore. "No," I said firmly. "Emma is welcome to stay with me for as long as she wants, and I support whatever decision she makes about the trip, whether that's going as planned, modifying it, or canceling it entirely." There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. "I don't recognize you anymore," my mother finally said. "That's because you've never really seen me, Mom," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice was. "You've been so focused on who you want me to be that you've never taken the time to know who I actually am." "That's not true," she protested, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her voice. "Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my photography, or came to one of my shows? When was the last time you asked me what I want, what makes me happy, what I dream about?" The silence that followed confirmed what I already knew. She couldn't remember because it had never happened. "I have a gallery showing in 3 months," I continued, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. "And I've applied for a prestigious photography residency in Iceland. These are big moments in my career, a career you've dismissed as a hobby because it doesn't fit your definition of success." "Caroline," she started, but I wasn't finished. "I do have a future, Mom. It's just not the one you imagine for me, and I'm done apologizing for that." I heard her sharp intake of breath. In our family, direct confrontation was rare, especially with my mother. She was used to her word being final, her judgment unquestioned. "Well," she said after a long pause, her voice brittle, "if that's how you feel, I suppose there's nothing more to discuss." "Actually, there's a lot more to discuss," I countered, "but only when you're ready to actually listen." She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood in my bedroom, phone still in hand, trembling slightly but feeling strangely light. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my mother without backing down, without qualifying my words, without seeking her approval. When I emerged from my bedroom, Emma was sitting up on the couch, clearly having heard at least part of my conversation. "Was that Mom?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. I nodded, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "She wanted me to send you home and talk you into accepting the trip as planned." Emma's expression was anxious. "What did you say?" "I told her you're welcome to stay here as long as you want, and that I support whatever decision you make about the trip." I sat beside her on the couch. I also told her a few other things that were long overdue. Emma's eyes widened. "Like what?" "Like the fact that I have a future, just not the one she envisioned, and that I'm done trying to meet her impossible standards." A slow smile spread across Emma's face. I wish I could have seen her face. She hesitated, then asked, "Are you okay?" I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. "I actually feel lighter, like I've put down a heavy weight I've been carrying for years." Emma nodded in understanding. "I know exactly what you mean." Over the next few days, Emma stayed with me, and we fell into a comfortable rhythm. During the day, I worked on preparing my portfolio for the gallery showing while Emma used my dining table as a makeshift office, catching up on work projects. In the evenings, we'd cook together and talk about our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. Sometimes we'd laugh until our sides hurt, remembering shared jokes and experiences from before our mother's expectations had driven a wedge between us. My father called several times, first trying to mediate, then gradually shifting to genuine interest in our lives. He seemed torn between loyalty to my mother and a growing recognition of the damage her rigid expectations had caused. On Emma's third night staying with me, we received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang just after 8 p.m. When I opened it, I was stunned to find my father standing there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Dad?" I stepped aside to let him in. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you both," he said, his eyes finding Emma, who had come to stand beside me. "Your mother and we've been doing a lot of talking." He declined my offer of coffee, instead pacing my small living room as if trying to organize his thoughts. "I've been thinking about what you said, Caroline," he finally began. "About us never asking what makes you happy or what you dream about." He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "You were right, and I'm sorry." I sat down, unprepared for this acknowledgement. "And Emma?" He turned to my sister. "I'm sorry we've been pushing you down a path without ever asking if it was what you truly wanted." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "It's okay, Dad." "No, it's not," he said firmly. "Your mother and we thought we were doing the right thing, pushing you both toward what we saw as success, security." He ran a hand through his gray hair. "But we got so caught up in our vision for your lives that we stopped seeing you, really seeing you, a long time ago." It was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen my father. This man who had built a successful business, who had always presented a strong, certain front to the world, was standing in my apartment, acknowledging his mistakes. "What about Mom?" Emma asked quietly. Dad sighed heavily. "Your mother is struggling with all of this. Her intentions have always been good. She wants the best for both of you. But her definition of best is so narrow, so specific." He shook his head. "We've had some difficult conversations these past few days." "Is she still angry about the trip?" I asked. "Yes and no," Dad replied. "She's hurt and confused. For so long she's believed she knows what's best for both of you. Having that challenged is difficult for her." I could imagine. My mother had always been the family authority on everything from career choices to what we wore to dinner parties. Having both her daughters push back against her vision was probably unprecedented in her experience. "What happens now?" Emma asked. Dad sat down heavily on the couch. "That depends on both of you. The trip is still available if you want it, Emma, in whatever form makes sense to you." Emma glanced at me, then back at our father. "I need some time to think about what I really want." Dad nodded. "Take all the time you need." He turned to me. "And Caroline, your mother and I would like to come to your gallery showing, if you'll have us." I was speechless for a moment. "You want to come?" "Very much," he said simply. "I'd like to see your work properly displayed, to understand this part of your life better." Later that night, after Dad had gone, Emma and I sat on my small balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Do you think Mom will really come to your showing?" Emma asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "It would be a big step for her, an admission that my path might have value after all." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "And what about you? Will you let them come?" I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I decided. "But not because I need their approval anymore. Because I'm proud of my work, and I'm ready for them to see who I really am, whether they understand it or not." Emma smiled. "That's growth." The next morning, I received an email that would change everything. I had been accepted into the photography residency in Iceland. 6 months in one of the most visually stunning places on Earth, working alongside renowned photographers from around the world. When I told Emma, she hugged me so tightly, I could barely breathe. "I knew you'd get it," she exclaimed, genuine joy lighting up her face. "When do you leave?" 3 weeks after the gallery showing, I said, still in shock. I can't believe it's really happening. That evening, Emma made a decision of her own. She called our father and told him she would accept a modified version of the trip, 3 months instead of a year, focusing on places she genuinely wanted to explore, with no obligation to attend business meetings or network with our father's connections. And, she told me after hanging up, I've decided to apply to graduate programs in economic anthropology while I'm traveling. See if I can turn that discovery trip into something that's actually meaningful to me. 2 days later, Emma moved back to her own apartment. Our relationship had been transformed by those days of honest conversation and mutual support. The competitive dynamic our mother had fostered between us had been replaced by something healthier, 2 sisters supporting each other's different paths. As the date of my gallery showing approached, I threw myself into preparation. Selecting the final images, working with the gallery owner on placement and lighting, writing the short descriptions that would accompany each photograph. The collection was titled Liminal Spaces, capturing moments of transition, thresholds between one state of being and another. Looking at the complete collection, I realized it was, in many ways, a visual representation of my own journey away from seeking external validation and toward embracing my authentic vision. The week before the showing, I received a text from my mother, the first direct communication since our phone confrontation weeks earlier. "What should I wear to your gallery opening?" Simple words, but from my mother, they represented a monumental shift. I texted back, "Something comfortable. It might be crowded." Her response came quickly. "I'm proud of you, Caroline." 5 words I'd been waiting to hear my entire life, yet strangely, I found they didn't affect me the way they once would have. I appreciated them, but my sense of self-worth no longer hinged on her approval. I had found my own path, my own definition of success. Her recognition was welcome, but no longer necessary. The night of the gallery showing arrived, warm for early autumn, the kind of evening that hints at Indian summer. The gallery was transformed, my photographs displayed with perfect lighting against pristine white walls. Friends began to arrive, followed by local art critics, other photographers and collectors the gallery owner had invited. I stood in the center of the gallery, surrounded by my work, feeling a curious blend of vulnerability and pride. Each photograph represented not just a moment captured, but a piece of how I saw the world, my unique vision made visible. Emma arrived early, stunning in a simple black dress, her excitement palpable. "This is incredible, Caro," she whispered, squeezing my hand as she looked around at the displayed photographs. "Seeing them all together like this, it tells a story." The gallery owner, Diane, a woman in her 50s with an impeccable eye and decades of experience in the art world, approached us with 2 glasses of champagne. "Your sister's work is exceptional," she told Emma, handing us each a glass. "There's a rawness to her landscapes that feels almost confessional." She turned to me with a warm smile. "Several collectors have already expressed interest. I think it's going to be a very good night." As more guests arrived and the gallery filled with conversation and movement, I found myself watching the door. Despite my newfound independence from my parents' approval, part of me still hoped they would come, would make the effort to see and understand this part of my life. Just as I was beginning to think they wouldn't show, I saw them walk through the door. My mother, elegant as always in a tailored navy dress, her silver hair swept into its usual perfect chignon. My father beside her, looking somewhat out of place but determined. They paused just inside the entrance, taking in the scene. I watched as my mother's eyes moved from photograph to photograph, her expression unreadable. My father spotted me and nudged her, and they made their way across the room. "Caroline," my mother said when they reached me, her voice carrying a formality that belied her discomfort. "Congratulations on your showing." "Thank you for coming," I replied. genuinely appreciative of the effort it must have taken her to be here, in this space so different from her usual social circles. "Your work is..." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's very powerful." Coming from my mother, who had always dismissed my photography as a hobby, this was significant. I could see she was trying, in her way, to bridge the chasm that had grown between us. "Would you like me to show you around?" I offered. "Tell you a bit about each piece?" She nodded, and I led my parents through the gallery, explaining the story behind each photograph, the technical challenges, the meaning I had hoped to convey. My father asked thoughtful questions, showing genuine interest. My mother said little, but I could feel her really looking at my work, perhaps for the first time. We stopped before a large photograph near the center of the gallery, a solitary figure standing at the edge of a vast salt flat, the horizon line blurring the boundary between earth and sky. It was one of my favorite pieces in the collection. "This one is extraordinary," my father said quietly. "The sense of scale, how small the person is against that landscape, yet they don't seem diminished by it." "That's exactly what I was trying to capture," I said, surprised and touched by his insight. The human figure isn't overwhelmed by the vastness. They're part of it, connected to it. My mother studied the photograph in silence for a long moment. "Is that Emma?" she finally asked, peering at the distant figure. "No," I said. "It's me. Emma took that photograph." My mother's head snapped toward me in surprise. "Emma took this?" "Yes. On a trip we took to Utah last year." I didn't add that it had been a trip my parents hadn't known about. A rare weekend when Emma had escaped her rigid schedule of internships and networking events to join me for a photography expedition. My mother looked back at the photograph, seeing it anew. "I didn't know she had an interest in photography." "There's a lot about both of us you don't know, Mom," I said gently, without accusation. She met my eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw something there. Regret, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. Then her social mask slipped back into place as a collector approached to ask about pricing for one of my larger pieces. As the evening progressed, I was pulled in multiple directions, discussing techniques with fellow photographers, answering questions from potential buyers, accepting congratulations from friends. Through it all, I kept track of my parents from the corner of my eye. My father seemed to be genuinely enjoying himself, engaged in conversation with various guests. My mother remained more reserved, but didn't leave early as I had half expected she might. Near the end of the evening, when the crowd had thinned somewhat, I found my mother standing alone before a photograph I had taken of an abandoned farmhouse at dawn, golden light streaming through broken windows. "This reminds me of my grandmother's house," she said when I joined her, "in Virginia. We used to visit every summer when I was a child." It was the first personal reflection she'd offered all evening. "I didn't know that," I said. "There's a lot we don't know about each other, it seems." She turned to face me. "Your father and I have been talking a great deal since the dinner." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I've always wanted what's best for you and your sister," she said, echoing my father's words from weeks earlier. "But I'm beginning to understand that my vision of best might have been limited." Coming from my mother, this was as close to an apology as I was likely to get. I could see the effort it took her to admit even this much. "I know you wanted the best for us," I acknowledged, "but the best thing parents can do is help their children become who they're meant to be, not who the parents want them to be." She flinched slightly at my directness, but didn't disagree. "Your sister tells me she's applying to graduate programs in economic anthropology, I believe she called it." "Yes. It combines her business background with her interest in how culture affects economic decisions. I think she'll be brilliant at it." My mother nodded slowly. "And you'll be going to Iceland?" "For 6 months, yes. The residency is a huge opportunity for me professionally. Iceland, she repeated, as if trying to picture it. Will it be safe, traveling alone like that? I suppressed a smile at this glimpse of maternal concern, breaking through her usual focus on achievement and status. It's very safe, Mom, and I won't be alone. There will be 5 other photographers in the program. She nodded again, then surprised me by asking, Will you send pictures while you're there? Of the landscape, you mean? Of everything. The landscape, your work, where you're staying. She hesitated. You. It was such a simple request, yet so unprecedented in our relationship. My mother had never shown interest in the details of my daily life, only in measurable achievements. I'd like that, I said softly. As the evening drew to a close, Diane approached me with a broad smile. Caroline, congratulations. We've sold 7 pieces tonight, including your centerpiece to a major collector. She handed me a glass of champagne. A toast to your success and to your future. Over her shoulder, I caught my mother's eye. She raised her own glass slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the word she had once denied me. Future. After the showing, Emma insisted on taking me out to celebrate. We went to a small jazz club where we could talk over drinks and music. I saw you talking with Mom, Emma said once we were seated. How did that go? I stirred my drink, thinking. Better than I expected, actually. She's trying, in her way. She asked me about economic anthropology yesterday, Emma said, sounding as surprised as I felt. Actually asked questions and listened to the answers. It was weird. We both laughed, imagining our mother, who had always been so certain of what constituted a worthy career, trying to understand our unconventional choices. Are you still leaving on your trip next week? I asked. Emma nodded. 3 months exploring on my own terms. I'm starting in Japan, then Southeast Asia. She smiled. I'm taking my camera. Send me pictures? Every day, she promised. And you'll be in Iceland when I get back. We'll have to meet somewhere in the middle when I return. Compare adventures. Deal. She raised her glass. To our futures, whatever they may be. 3 days after the gallery showing, I received a package from my parents. Inside was a professional-grade camera bag, perfect for the rugged conditions I'd face in Iceland, along with a card in my father's handwriting. For your journey. We're proud of the path you've chosen. Below his signature was a line in my mother's elegant script. Take care of yourself. Send pictures. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. The years of being measured against an impossible standard, of having my choices dismissed, couldn't be erased with a single gallery showing or a thoughtful gift. My mother would likely always struggle to fully understand my definition of success. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that my path had value, that my future was real and worthy of respect. The day before I left for Iceland, Emma helped me pack, offering advice on cold weather gear and laughing at my attempt to cram 6 months of life into 2 suitcases. I can't believe we'll both be having adventures at the same time, she said, folding a heavy sweater and adding it to my case. A year ago, could you have imagined this? I shook my head. A year ago, I was still trying to prove myself to Mom, still seeking her approval. And now I'm seeking my own approval, creating work that matters to me, regardless of whether anyone else values it. Emma smiled. That's the most liberating thing, isn't it? Realizing that their judgment doesn't define us. The morning of my departure, I stood in my apartment one last time, looking around at the space that would be waiting for me when I returned. My walls were bare now, the photographs that had hung there either sold at the gallery or carefully packed for storage. But the emptiness didn't feel like loss. It felt like possibility, like a blank canvas waiting for new visions. My phone chimed with a text from my mother. Safe travels. We'll be following your journey. 6 simple words that would have meant the world to me once, Now, they were welcome, but no longer necessary for my happiness or sense of self-worth. I had found my voice, my vision, my future, not despite my mother's dismissal, but perhaps because of it. Her words at Emma's graduation dinner, "She has a future, you don't," had been the final push I needed to stop seeking external validation and start creating a life on my own terms. I texted back, "Thank you. I'll send pictures of Iceland soon." Then I picked up my suitcases and headed for the door, stepping confidently into a future that was entirely my own. As my plane took off later that day, I watched the coastline recede, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment, from a lifetime of trying to meet impossible standards to the liberation of choosing my own path. From my mother's cruel words at a dinner table, to the quiet recognition in her eyes as she viewed my work. From emotional distance with my sister, to a renewed bond based on mutual support and understanding. I opened my carry-on bag and took out my camera, turning it over in my hands. This tool that had once been dismissed as a hobby was now the key to my future, my voice, my place in the world. With it, I would capture landscapes few ever see, translate light and shadow into emotion, tell stories without words. The future my mother couldn't see was now spreading out before me, vast and full of possibility. And for the first time in my life, I was moving toward it without looking back for approval, without seeking validation from anyone but myself. It wasn't that I no longer cared what my family thought. I did, and always would. But their opinion was no longer the measure of my worth. I had found something more valuable: the courage to define success on my own terms and the strength to pursue it unapologetically. As the plane rose above the clouds, I thought about Emma, preparing for her own journey of discovery. About my father, slowly beginning to see beyond the narrow definition of success he'd clung to for decades. Even about my mother, taking small steps toward understanding that her daughters' lives wouldn't follow the script she'd written for them, and that this wasn't a failure, but a triumph. I closed my eyes, feeling the vibration of the plane as it carried me toward new horizons. Ahead lay Iceland, 6 months of volcanic landscapes, glacial ice, northern lights. 6 months of creating images that spoke to my vision of the world. 6 months of becoming more fully the artist and person I was meant to be. She has a future, you don't. My mother had been wrong. We all had futures, just not the ones she had imagined for us. And in that difference lay all the beauty, all the possibility, all the authenticity of a life truly lived. I opened my eyes, raised my camera to the window, and captured the first image of my journey. Sunlight breaking through clouds, illuminating the vast expanse of ocean below. A threshold crossed, a new beginning. My future, finally and completely my own,